The morning was gray and gloomy, with tiny droplets of rain gathering on the windshields. Captain William Cross was driving slowly toward Edward Dorsey's house. The cobblestone streets gleamed with wet clay, reflecting a steely sheen like old knives. Edward Dorsey met Cross at the doorstep with deliberate coldness. "Ah, Captain, your timing couldn't be worse," Dorsey grumbled, making it clear he was in a hurry. Cross smirked. "Do you know Frederick Larson?" he finally asked, the reason for his visit clear. But Dorsey's story didn't shed any light on the matter. He was ready for the question. Dorsey said that back in college, he had been friends with Frederick Larson and Billy McCoy. Later, he did work with Larson at the Department of Health, but in different divisions. At some point, he ran into McCoy, who was in need of money. Dorsey offered him a temporary job, but McCoy quit soon after. Work like that just wasn't for him. After McCoy left, Dorsey never saw either Larson or McCoy again. As he was leaving, Cross showed Dorsey a torn fragment of a photograph and asked if he knew who was in it. Dorsey, who had been in a hurry, suddenly stopped and examined the photo closely. His face showed concern and unease. "No, I don't remember who that was. Probably some girl from our college," Dorsey said, quickly trying to wrap things up again. "I'm going to ask you not to leave town," Cross said, before stepping out of the house. Now, William was certain Edward Dorsey knew exactly who else was in that photograph, and that knowledge unsettled him. Perfect. In this state, he's bound to slip up sooner or later, William thought. From Dorsey's house, Cross headed to the Department of Health. The building looked monumental. Long hallways with mosaic floors, massive columns, and light-colored walls reminded him of the hours spent in college corridors. Larson? Oh, right, he was fired recently, a thin, weary-eyed clerk informed him. Cards, ruined the man. Late-night games, drinking. He just stopped showing up for work. Well, that's life. Now things were starting to make sense for Cross. The business card from the insurance company with Larson's name fit neatly into the puzzle. After leaving the Department of Health, Larson had likely found a job at an insurance company. But where had he disappeared to now? Cross returned to the station. He issued all necessary orders for a stakeout, watching both Dorsey's house and the home of the late Miss Chesser. The phone in his office was ringing insistently. It was Sergeant Martinez keeping an eye on Miss Chesser's house. "Sir, a red Packard pulled up a few minutes ago." A red-hailed woman got out. At first she seemed about to enter the house, but then suddenly changed her mind and drove off, heading out of town. 10 minutes later, he was closing in on the red Packard on the highway. As he pulled up alongside it, he saw the red-haired woman behind the wheel, wearing black sunglasses. Cross signaled for her to stop. He sped ahead, cut her off, and blocked the road. "Captain Cross," William introduced himself. "Would you be so kind as to step out of the car?" Cross was polite, but well aware of how bold the woman sitting before him could be. She got out, perfectly calm. "I assume you'd like to have a word with me. Shall we go to that cafe?" she asked, nodding toward a small cafe nearby. Cross gave a slight nod. They walked inside. The open windows carried the aroma of coffee and fresh bread, mixed with the smoky scent of an old charcoal grill in the cafe's backyard. The woman remained unshaken, as if she and Cross were old acquaintances. He ordered 2 cups of coffee. "Would you mind if I stepped into the ladies' room for a moment?" she asked with a smile. Cross noted that she was quite beautiful. "Go ahead," he replied, watching as she walked toward the restroom. His gaze lingered on her shoes. Those unusual shoes from the photograph still wouldn't leave his mind. Even though many years had passed since that photograph was taken, Cross now found himself unconsciously paying attention to the shoes of every woman who walked by. Running away would have been pointless for the red-haired stranger. Cross had seen her face, and besides, her expensive car was still parked outside the cafe. About 3 minutes later, the coffee arrived. Cross took a sip and laughed. He knew now that the red-haired woman wouldn't be coming back for hers. Just for formality, he stepped into the restroom. Seeing the empty room and the open window, Cross called the duty officer from the cafe and told him to impound the red Packard. At the station, Sergeant Phillips was waiting for him. He had been keeping an eye on Edward Dorsey and had just finished his shift, bringing a report to Cross. Phillips stated that over the past 24 hours, he hadn't noticed anything unusual in Dorsey's behavior. The only unusual place Dorsey had visited the day before was an abandoned watermill by the river. He had stayed there for about an hour, and when he left, Phillips checked the mill but found nothing suspicious. William Cross gave the sergeant a long, scrutinizing look. He suddenly felt a strong urge to meet the person who had hired Phillips in the first place. Without a word, Cross stood up, grabbed his holster with his pistol, took a flashlight, and headed straight for his car. Phillips watched him leave with a puzzled expression. A minute later, the powerful Buick was speeding toward the river. Cross knew that mill well. Mothers in town used to scare misbehaving children with ghost stories about it. He parked his car in the bushes to avoid announcing his arrival and proceeded toward the mill on foot. The old, time-worn structure loomed ahead, almost like a living creature staring at him with its hollow black window sockets. Somewhere in the distance, the river murmured, while the wind whispered softly through the treetops, as if discussing his visit. As Cross approached the mill, he listened carefully. The only sound breaking the silence was the river's steady rush. He searched the entire mill, convinced there had to be a hidden entrance. Dorsey hadn't spent an hour here for nothing. Lifting the beam and the rusty metal sheets beneath it, he uncovered a hatch secured with a padlock. After struggling with the lock for a moment, he finally pried it open. He pulled out the flashlight he had brought from the station and climbed down. Pushing past scattered wooden planks, he finally came upon a 5-meter-wide circular concrete well. The groaning was coming from inside. The stench was overwhelming. At the bottom of the well, lying in the filth, was a ragged, overgrown man, barely recognizable as Frederick Larson. "Well, you're a sight for sore eyes, my friend," Cross muttered, peering down into the pit. The rescue operation took over an hour. Larson was in such terrible shape he looked more like a ghost than a man. Exhausted, filthy, and drenched in sweat, Cross dragged him to the car and rushed him to the hospital. Dorsey was officially wanted. A team was dispatched to arrest him, and a stakeout was set up at the mill. That evening, Cross sat by Frederick Larson's hospital bed, trying to get some answers. But Larson was so weak, he could barely move his tongue. William leaned in and asked, "Why was Eleanor killed?" Larson slowly turned his head and whispered, "The will." Now the motive behind Eleanor Chesser's murder was becoming clear, but one question remained. Who could have inherited her estate? She was divorced and had no children. Seeing Larson's condition, Cross decided to postpone the interrogation until the next day and return to the station. The officers sent to arrest Edward Dorsey came back empty-handed. His house was completely deserted. It was late in the evening when Cross was finally getting ready to head home. At the entrance to the police station, Sergeant Martinez and 2 other officers were smoking. Martinez admired Cross's Buick. He'd wanted a car like that for a long time, but with a wife and 3 daughters, he could never afford such a luxury. At that moment, a deafening explosion shook the air. Cross's sleek Buick was blown to pieces. Seconds later, twisted scraps of metal and torn bits of leather rained down from the sky. Thick clouds of dust rolled across the scorching asphalt. Everyone inside the station rushed outside. Chief Harris was among them. He approached the wreckage cautiously, scanning the remains of the Buick. Has anyone seen Cross? Harris looked around, confused. I am here, Chief, Cross said from behind him, staring at what was left of his car. Near the station entrance, cops who had been smoking nearby were scrambling to their feet. Fortunately, no one was hurt in the blast. Mendoza, check on everyone. Johnson, find whatever's left of the explosive device. I don't care if it takes all night, Harris ordered. Looking around, the chief motioned for Cross to follow him into his office. Without a word, he walked over to the safe, pulled out a bottle of whiskey and poured 2 glasses. I've been meaning to trade in my Buick for a new model, Cross said with a sigh. Guess insurance will take care of it. We identified the owner of that red Packard, some Mrs. Catherine Vanderbilt, Harris said, still unable to take his eyes off the window. Now we just need to find out if that name is real or not. You handle that tomorrow. I'll deal with the explosion and your Buick, Harris said before downing a glass of whiskey in one go. Cross stepped outside and walked over to the forensic team. William, go home. I'll have something for you in the morning, said Johnson. But take a look at this. He handed Cross a small piece of aluminum. But it was a fragment of an electronic detonator from the bomb. Cross had seen one like it before, but couldn't recall where. He handed the piece back and wearily sank into a patrol car that took him home. Evelyn met Cross on the porch with a bright smile and threw her arms around him. William felt a pang of guilt for leaving her alone here, but the job had to be finished. Sergeant Winslow said his goodbyes and drove home. It'll all be over soon, William said, running his fingers through her hair. Evelyn looked into his eyes, and he felt that everything in his life up to this moment had been nothing more than a rough draft. That night, Cross made up his mind. He would propose to Miss Lambert.